All right. Brian Carroll.
Yep, I'm here.
Ian Chowdhury.
I'm here.
I am present. Jake Cohen. Amy Contreras. All right. Alan.
Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. Nothing more romantic than a advisory board meeting this afternoon. Lots of love for the city and infrastructure today.
Yeah, real infrastructure love today. Paul Gonzer. All right. Christopher Johnson.
Present.
Gary Johnson. Okay. Joe Levy. Jamie Lewis.
Here.
Aileen McCallum. Kurt Morrison. Chris Pacheco.
I'm here.
I see you, Joe. Thank you. Jonathan Pira.
Yes.
Julie Reskin.
Yep, I'm here.
Awesome. And Tangier Wright, I believe, said she was going to be absent. Did I miss anyone? All right. Alan, is that a quorum?
Chris Pacheco is not. I think he's no longer with us. He's no longer the panelist.
Actually, yeah, I think he rejoined.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's right.
Oh,
Great for the city, bad for us. I'm not sure if that's a quorum. Are we taking? Do we have any voting items today, Jake? Sorry, I didn't get to do the
No.
math on
Okay.
on that. So I guess we'll be fine
Cool.
either way. Unless Jamie, do you have any voting items from your committee?
No, I don't think there's anything on there. Just request to staff. That's it.
I'm
we could
guessing we'll be
vote on-
fine if not surprised in giving it Valentine's Day that we might not for our first day without a quorum.
Well, if we wanted to leave, we could vote on voting items and then see what happens.
okay. We have 3 speakers today, but it looks like only one. Sharp, and I am going to move. David, I am moving you to the panelist. Let me know if you're there.
Okay, you got me?
Okay, the floor is yours.
Looks good, David.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I wanted to give public comment on, I guess, on public comments, and specifically in regards to the DRCOG project selection process that's on the agenda for today. In October, on the last round of project selection, Denver submitted project a $5 million TIP project to design the Winding of Pena Boulevard, and there were over 150 public comments opposing that project, and it wasn't funded. And now 3 months later, Denver is resubmitting the same exact project again. So I guess my question is, does the process take public comment into consideration at all? Are we wasting our time? Is this even, is there any utility in involving the public? Or if you get a very loud opposition to a project, are you just going ahead with it anyway? And is this kind of just for show? So I was hoping you could ask the DRCOG folks in the sub-regional forum people how they do take into account public comment, and if this project will indeed move forward despite such objections. Thank you.
David, thank you. I am going to move you back to the attendees.
Anita, you said we had 3 public commenters, right?
It's the auto one didn't show up.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we had like 1 today.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. Okay, if I'm understanding correctly, that's it for our public comment today. I believe we now need to approve our January meeting minutes.
Ooh, nice.
Sorry, I'm hearing someone.
Was there someone who was trying to speak?
I think that was Rebecca.
Oh,
My apologies.
No worries. Awesome. So all those in favor of,
I just had a comment on the minutes. It seemed like there was like some misunderstanding of like the snow issue, because it seems like they were conflating sidewalk enforcement with plowing. So I don't know if that might have been how it was said. I just wanted to raise that when I read it. It's that it seemed, what I was talking about was enforcing the ordinance about clearing sidewalks. And I mean, I think the plowing is certainly an issue, but then the answer was about we're following our policy on plowing, which wasn't really the question. So I don't know if again, I don't remember if that's actually how the discussion went or if like something got missed in there, but they're two separate, they're both related to snow, but they're 2 separate issues.
I'm happy to go make that correction for sure, Julie. Could you remind me, was it earlier or later in the meeting?
It was early. It was
Thank
like the
you.
first thing.
Great, I'm happy to update that. Thank you.
Well, thanks. And thanks for doing such good minutes.
I do my best, clearly little misses here and there, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, no, you can actually read them and know what happened. So like if you have to miss a meeting, you can actually know. So
Yeah, I
with
second
that, I'll
that.
move the minutes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Not hearing any, the minutes are approved. Nanita, I'm just double checking because I think we did our public comment a little early today. Did any of the other public commenters show up at this point?
Let me double check. Let me go to the attendees. No, they did it. But we
Okay.
have 1 person lifting his hand. Do you want me to let him speak?
If no one on the board is opposed, I'm willing to entertain that. Cool.
Have time.
Sweet.
Blake, I'm going to promote you to the panelist. Let me know when you're in. Oh.
Hi, I'm sorry. I thought I had signed up to be able to give public commentary. I'm not sure if
Yeah,
I did
go
that
for it.
correctly or not.
Go ahead.
So okay, so I was actually calling, I was calling on the ADA compliance, like with the sidewalks and stuff. I live in District 9, and a lot of the sidewalks, especially like coming out of the light rail station, like where I live, is 40th and Colorado Station. And the sidewalks near the light rail stations, and they're great. They're up to ADA standard. But once you come into the neighborhoods, like mine, for instance, the sidewalks are nowhere near ADA compatible. And there's been instances where people have fallen because the I guess the slopes for the curb and gutters are not correct, and there's no drainage system. For instance, when the snow does melt, for the snow that melts to go, it just kind of pulls up, and it creates a problem, like where we've had to call 911 to actually have people in wheelchairs lifted out of where the ice refreezes. And I have noticed when the like ramps around here were put in, that the sidewalks were not paid attention to. It was just the ramps, and where it is supposed to drain and go down, it just pulls up, like where it dips within the middle of the streets. And so that's one of my biggest concerns, is how that affects the compliance for ADA, because when the snow does melt, it freezes onto the sidewalk, and people are actually having to walk or use their wheelchairs into the street to be able to get around where they can't access. And it's just unsafe for people on foot and people in wheelchairs, especially when drivers aren't paying attention. And we've had numerous accidents where I live, where people have rolled their cars because the dips are right there. And so it just creates a very dangerous situation. And I wanted to bring that to the attention of you guys.
Thank you, Blake.
Thank you. It's nice to see a District 9 person here.
Okay, I'll move you back.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys letting me speak.
All right. Great. If we don't have anything else for public comment, we can move on to the report from DOTI leadership.
I think, was Clarissa, Nanita, did you say Clarissa had joined? Was she one of the speakers, or was she
She's on the board.
Oh, sorry. I saw a note there. So great. Thank you. I'll update that on the attendance. Thanks for joining us.
All right, with that, Jake, you ready for me? Thank you, sir. Couple items here today, mostly follow-up. I'm not going to go into real great detail on this with our Broadway and I-25 here, but do have some materials to send out to the advisory board. So I think just as a recap, major project of the I-25 and Broadway interchange occurring, project that started in kind of the mid 2000s, I think around 2008, maybe late 2000 on there. And as we've been working on it kind of as funding comes in on there. But as we've gotten closer to kind of some very heavy infrastructure work on there, I've been hearing more concern, additional concern from the community on that. And, understandably, I think as we've said before, the project reflects department's and city's values from a different time, 2008. A lot has changed. I mean, heck, I'll blame it on Public Works. DOTI knows what it's doing. No, but certainly that's just a reflection of differing values. So we have worked pretty closely with West Wash Park and Lincoln Broadway, and a number of other RNOs have been interested in that. And over the past 6 months, have really been trying to dive in to see what we can do to improve this project. Main concerns from the community was the ability, or really the kind of safety and the ability for folks on the east side of Broadway, I think West Wash Park and kind of those neighborhoods over there, to make it over to Broadway and I-25 station, what will eventually be the, I don't call it anymore, but kind of the Gates Rubber Factory redevelopment on there. And certainly the RNOs raised some very valid concerns on there. So our planning team has been out and really tried to dive in and say, how can we better align this project to reflect the community's needs and really kind of bring it up to snuff with how we are approaching this. And if you can't tell, I am vamping because I've now lost the press release that we just did. So today we released a press release after we met with Amy Kenry and Brittany Spinner from the, I believe they've spoken to this group before, and reviewed some different changes here. If you'll give me just one sec. Okay, here we go. I know I had this on there. So I'm going to send out with the, or I'll have Nina send out with this a list of our press release and a map showing basically what the changes were. But just to kind of go over them, and we can go into more depth at a subsequent meeting, certainly happy to do that. But really looking at engineering treatments to better protect pedestrians, slowing right-hand turns from Broadway onto Ohio, a new east-west pedestrian crossing at Broadway on the south side of Ohio, installation of a 10 to 12 foot multi-use path on both sides of Kentucky, Broadway, Ohio, and the east side of Bannock within the limits, the project limits, the removal of one lane of South Lincoln Street from Ohio to the traffic signal to the north to shorten the pedestrian crossing distance, provide a wider buffer for pedestrians on the east side of Lincoln for folks trying to get across, kind of like we said, and then a raised crosswalk where cars that access I-25 that puts better visibility of our pedestrians. And these are some substantial changes. You know, I know there was concern about maybe the pace and even lack of communication around it, and certainly understand that, but just want to make sure folks know, you know, we were not twiddling our thumbs. These are some pretty substantial improvements on that. And so we met with Amy and Brittany yesterday, kind of went through the map. They've been processing it, and they've got a few additional comments that we will try to address on there, but felt like it was a positive meeting on that, and feel like we have a considerably better direction on this project. I don't think anybody, and certainly Amy and Brittany would agree, this intersection it's a mess on there. I go through it nearly every day. I use Broadway and I-25 station. I live just south of there on there, and it's confusing. It's very confusing to get through and dangerous. So I am pleased with kind of where we've gotten to this far. There's still some work to be done, and there's still you know, we still have multiple project partners that we are coordinating with. These are all, we're very confident we'll be able to execute these within the scope of the project and on that. So very, very excited about that. So kind of more to come on that, but give you a quick update, and you will, I'll have Nanita send you guys the project map and the press release with the information on there. The only other thing, sidewalk, I think the 307, we talked about, met with the executive committee here. I think we're still moving towards having our stakeholder process, kind of public stakeholder process, begin latter part of this month, more likely early next month on that. And so I would anticipate we would have a meatier update for y'all at our March meeting on there. So what, I'll stop there. Happy to answer any questions.
Julie, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, so I think Alan's put the press release in the chat. So first of all, I'm thrilled that you guys are addressing the concerns of the stakeholders, because we've had a number of meetings, people come and express concerns. But so thank you for that. But it says DOTI explores. What does that mean? Because that to me, that exploring is different than we're going to do. So like who decides when is it like we are doing this versus we're thinking about it?
It's much more than we are thinking about it, and you can blame a lawyer for having written that letter on there. But it is much more. So as I kind of referenced there, there's multiple project partners with this. Now, this isn't new to them. We've talked about these things. So that is, we have strong confidence that these will be executed, but, you know, lawyers.
Alan?
I just wanted to echo Julie and say this, you know, you all taking this community feedback to heart and looking at this stuff really makes me proud to be a member of this board and be associated with DOTI. So thank you all for listening to community on this. I know it's a very big deal for people that live in the neighborhood. So thank you, Nick, and thank you to everybody.
Right back at you guys.
Yeah, I'm gonna pile on that because I'm really, you know, kicked off the I-25 sub task force, and you know, Nick, you were really responsive to our letters and super appreciative of that. I know that I think I saw Amy and Brittany are both in the attendee group. I'm just really pleased that we have great neighborhood advocates, and then we have a department that's willing to listen to them. This here is what city government is supposed to look like, and I know public servants don't always get the credit they're deserved out of their day-to-day work, but this is a really high stakes project where you guys not only have citizens involved, you have a lot of partners that you're really dependent on for funding, and I'm sure it's not easy to navigate those waters, but I'm just super appreciative that you guys took the feedback that, you know, Brittany and Amy and numerous members of the board and the community as a whole provided. You know, that is the dream for you know, a participatory government, and I'm really appreciative of the work that DOTI put into that.
Thank you. And again, the advisory board providing kind of the forum, the feedback on that, you know, like you said, it takes all of us to get these things done, but very pleased with, you know, I did very little work, mostly a little bit of writing here, but on that, the big kudos to David Nemovets and Jen Hillhouse from our planning team on there, and yeah, took it very seriously and found it to be a very productive process. So appreciative.
Oh, and one more thing. I don't know if I've seen a raised crosswalk anywhere outside of a public park in the city of Denver. So just huge kudos for that really innovative use of that. And I will be a thorn again, Nick, I'm sure, when we see the detailed plans, but I'm very excited about the direction you guys took on this.
I wouldn't have it any other way, Jake.
All right, perfect. Any other comments or questions for Nick? All right. Oh, Jonathan.
Yep, less so comment for Nick, more so for the attendees who may be watching this meeting or others who didn't see some of our emails within this group. Just letting everyone know, Nick referenced 2 ongoing projects, the I-25 and Broadway update we've just been discussing, as well as the 307 committee, the sidewalks ordinance implementation and sort of modifications update. Just letting everyone watching know that we have held time on our March agenda for more substantive updates on both of those. So part of the reason we're not diving into detail during this meeting, we will have a forum for that in about a month.
Yes, thank you, Jonathan. Today, though, this is my best attempt at a segue here. Today, though, we will talk about a big topic from one of our past meetings, and that is snow plowing, which should be our next topic on the agenda. And I believe we have Nick Williams and Cindy Patton to talk to us about that.
Yes, sir. And Nanita, I don't know if you're the boss of control on this, but if you could allow me to share my screen.
Give me 1 second.
All right. And yeah, well, I want to introduce myself. I think you guys know me at this point, but while Nanita's doing that, joined today by Cindy Patton, who is our Senior Director of Operations on there and oversees the divisions that are most responsible for snow removal. So today we're going to give you kind of an overview of how we make snow decisions, why we make snow decisions, how much we spend on those snow decisions, and then get into a few of the other odds and ends that we've discussed in previous meetings. All right, I think we're in business. Are you able to see?
Not yet. There we go.
Hey, all right. Now let's see if I can even get my notes page up here. Okay, I think we are in business. All right, so today's topic, and it would appear to be a very timely topic because I think a lot of this is going to be implemented or is being implemented as we speak right there. So talking about snow removal and just, you know, kind of some context for snow on here. Denver, average snowfall between 55 and 60 inches a year, typically about 20 to 24 different winter weather events there. Season stretches from technically September through June. I think we would be very disappointed if we got if we got a snowstorm in June again, but it has happened in the past. And you know, I've lived a lot of places, and every single place I've lived, they do the, well, if you don't like the weather, wait a minute. But I'd say of all the places, Denver is probably the most accurate when it comes to that. You know, and just for reference, when we see 55 to 60 inches, for comparison, Minneapolis, they get about 51 inches of snow per year. And that surprised me. I was born in Minneapolis, and I did not really process that Denver actually gets more snow than Minneapolis. And then Salt Lake, kind of neighbor to the west, but I think mountains, they do get more. They're about 78 inches. So we fall somewhere between Minneapolis and Salt Lake on the kind of the similar sized snow routes. So how do we do our plowing? We have what we call main routes, A and B routes. That these are, think of these as kind of streets with stripes on them. We also address the protected bike lanes, and as well, when we get a heavier amount of snow, we will deploy our residential teams as well. Everyone works 12-hour shifts. Main routes, we've got about 55 of those. 12-hour shifts, we've got 2 teams of 8 folks for our protected bike lane and pedestrian bridge infrastructure, 36 routes for our residential. We have 2 12-hour shifts, a 3 a.m. to 3 p.m. and then a 3 p.m. to 3 a.m. On there. And we'll talk a little bit more about those different practices. So how much do we spend on snow? Typically, a light year, we're going to spend around 12 million, and that includes things such as de-icers, the parts we need for our trucks, the plow blades, labor expenses, and then certainly fuel. Heavier years, that number is more like 25 million. So whereas last year was about a $12 million year, 12.6, I'm guessing this year is going to be closer to the $25 million budget year. And if you look, kind of going back to our friends in Minneapolis, that is relatively comparable for our light year. So they spend approximately $13 million a year, Minneapolis does, with us being about 12 to 25 on there. So we keep up, even though our weather patterns are very different than in Minneapolis. Minneapolis isn't blessed with the sun like we are on there, but certainly similar experiences out there. So how do we prepare for a storm? There are several different public and private weather services that we subscribe to. So this includes National Weather Service, local radio, television, internet, sticking a finger out in the air on that. We also keep a meteorologist under contract to really kind of give us, and what you see on the screen here is an example from a snow last month or an expectation around last month. Don't count, it might have been last month. I don't remember getting snow at that point, but basically gives you an idea. So the team gets together a couple days out and really reviews. And you see, and I don't have to tell anybody here how much forecasts can vary. And we can talk a little bit about the December snow, and that was, or late November snow. And that was an example of where that variability didn't even cover what ultimately occurred on there. But you can see on here, you've got, for the same storm, you've got ranges anywhere from 5 inches to 16 inches on there. And so our team, very practiced in what we're looking at, is able to then develop our plan for how we're going to attack the snow. how do we communicate that out? Nancy Kuhn, our public information officer, is well practiced in making sure that we are communicating with the press. This is always something that is certainly interesting to the press because it is certainly interesting to the public on there. So the traditional media advisories, social media, 311, we have a dedicated snow website up there, the link up there. And then also, I think one of my favorites is Plow Tracker. So you can see when the plows are out and you can see where they've been and where they're, well, you can't see where they're going, but you can see where they are just to kind of see, are they in my neighborhood? Not yet on there. And so if you go to that and sign up for the Plow Tracker, you'll get an email every time it is turned on. It's typically turned on for our heavier snow. Going back to kind of the different types of streets. So when we talk about main streets, these are primarily streets as, or the streets with stripes, if easy way to think about it. We have 70 big plows to address the main streets on there. And we will, depending on what the forecast looked like, we will, the snow plan will decide kind of typically how many vehicles are we planning to deploy. Usually we're going to start from a full deployment and then kind of work back as the snow starts to accumulate and typically we can see how it's going to unfold on there and just try to manage it based on that. And as we went through before, the shifts these are 12-hour shifts, depending on the time, depending on the day and the conditions. Materials that we use on the main street. So dry de-icer, it's called ice slicer, fun to say, is a product we get that we use on most of our areas outside of the central business district. This is a natural product from Utah, and it gives you some grip, and it also should prevent the snow and ice from bonding to the pavement. More downtown, we use a liquid de-icer, and this is part of, fine particulate matter, PM10, some of the requirements, the federal requirements for the region's plan to comply with air quality standards. It even, involves this. And so the material we use and the speed at which we sweep it back up once the event is over, that was a factor in the brown cloud from previous years, and you'll still see it every now and then, but certainly that is why we are using different products in the central business district. In fact, they call it the sandbox, so they won't put sand in the sandbox. Residential snowplow program, and you see a couple of my colleagues here. So this is when we have a more substantial snowfall event. We have two different teams of residential snowplow drivers, and these are folks that are driving. You can kind of see pictures there, think of a 1-ton Silverado on there with a plow on it. And we have a standard shift that runs 3 p.m. to 3 a.m. and that's staffed by our street maintenance team. But then we also have an opportunity for dandies like myself who work behind a desk most of the time to get out and be a part of the snow fighting operation on there. And so the volunteers, both from DOTI and sometimes from other departments, will do the 3 p.m. to 3 a.m. shift out there. Typically, you're going to cover about 35 miles over a 12-hour shift on there. It is, I enjoy it. It's fun to be out there, fun to be kind of directly helping out on something. I think I got a round of applause, although I don't know if that was a commentary on just being excited to see us or just being excited that we were out there at all on there. But it is, I think it's one of the programs I'm prouder of in the department, because it really shows that, David Pulsifer and Katie Bridges up there. David is a planner. You guys may have interacted with him. Honestly, this is the only time I ever see him drive a motor vehicle. Otherwise, he is a avid cyclist. And then Katie Bridges, one of our performance office employees from Georgia, she suits up and goes out there. So very fun and very helpful. The goal of this is to make sure that people can get out of their neighborhoods. So this is definitely not a curb to curb style plowing on there. It is making a pass down the center of the road, utilizing a rubber bit on the plow to make sure that we are not launching manhole covers down the street, which happens if you're not careful on there. So it's going to typically leave an inch or two of snow on the ground, but really makes it easier for folks to be able to get out of their neighborhood. And certainly more critical is making sure that emergency services can get in and out of a neighborhood. Let's see, no de-icer on those on that. So it is basically just doing a swath down the center of the road. Protected bike lanes, off-street trails. Here you see on the right images of some of the equipment that we utilize to plow our protected bikeways. Of course, these are considerably narrow than a street, requiring different material. And so we've got the snowcat out there with an attachment that is kind of a brush-like attachment that then clears the snow through our protected bike lanes. And you can see the top image, I think, is right across from our web building on this. And again, we try to do every protected bikeway at least once per 12-hour snow shift on there. And then we partner with Denver Parks and Recreation on maintaining the city's off-street bicycle and multi-use trails. Removing snow on sidewalks. So this hopefully you're somewhat responsive to some of the comments earlier on here. The city by city code requires property owners to clear snow and ice from their sidewalks, including the adjacent ADA ramps on there. 24 hours or after the snow stops falling, you have 24 hours. This is regulated or administered and enforced by Community and Planning Design, the neighborhood inspection services. So CPD inspectors, if you are seeing areas that are not being shoveled on there, a 311 then activates a city inspector to go out and provide a notice, admin citation notice on there. They then have, if you're a business, you have 4 hours, and a residence has 24 hours before the inspector would recheck and potentially provide a $150 fine as a standard admin citation. The schedule of fines on there. So that is, you know, and we talked about it a little bit in context of Initiative 307. That does not change the responsibility for adjacent property owners to shovel their sidewalk on there. So that remains a requirement, and best method when you are seeing areas that are not being shoveled is to contact 311.
Can I ask a really specific question, Nick?
Sure.
Understood on the 307. Curious about multi-use paths, like particularly like under the 15th Street, like 15th Street, does that like dip under and the bike facility basically moves to the sidewalk, or like 21st in Ballpark, and potentially Broadway and I-25 when we look at some of those. So is that also maintained by either Parks and Rec or the, okay.
Yes. And, you know, there are times where CDOT is responsible, typically on paths and things, that's going to be us. But there are certainly with state highways and that, but yeah, typically that's going to be us or parks, depending on how it's classified.
Okay.
And I've got one more slide. If we want, I do see a hand, but if we want to, and this one's not super profound on there, but if we want to do this and then we can full open question. Does that work for you, Jake?
Sure. Yeah, probably should have done that anyway.
That's all right. We all get excited about snow on there. All right. And then ice in the curb and gutter. And I promise I didn't do this as a response to our public commenter. This was included in there because certainly after our kind of abnormal November, December storm there, this has been a concern and frankly remains a concern for a number of folks. This is, you guys all know this, south side of East-West streets is always going to struggle with that. Ice complaints, again, is 311. The team has been working through those, and I think Cindy will confirm, but we received about 1,300 of those. 800 of those we've been handling through ice blading, to where we send out a motor grader with a blade that effectively breaks up that ice, and then a number of different sanding requests as well on there. So, it takes time as we work our way through, but we do work our way through, and 311 again remains the best method for relaying those concerns. And with that, I'm happy to answer any additional questions.
All right, I believe Julie was definitely up first.
Thanks. So the problem with telling people to call 311 or use Pocket Gov is that they will not take a complaint unless you can give them the exact address, and there isn't always an address. There's places that don't have an address, and also if you can't get onto the sidewalk to get close, you can't see what the address is. And 311, the thing about using my location only works about half the time. And even then, I've had cases rejected from Pocket Gov when I'm hitting use my location and saying here, and then they'll say that is not an address. So that's my, so I know DOTI isn't in charge. Was there an agency or a board like this that is over whoever deals with this? Because it's the reporting is such a joke. And then the other thing is, it doesn't seem like there's any consequence for repeat offenders, where like they'll just do it in that, because you call, they'll get out there at some point, maybe half the time it's melted, but then it's like the same people keep reoffending, and it doesn't seem like they have any way to prioritize reoffenders. So I just want to know what agency is over this, because I want to see if they have a board like this, because this has just gone on for years.
Sure. So our 311 is administered by, or is managed by our technology services TS department on there. And I think I know what you're talking about, Julie, as far as like the direction, the address on there. And then the sidewalk inspection and the folks that are authorized to issue citations for that is the Community Planning Development Department, CPD, as they are called.
All right, Jamie?
Yeah, I had two questions. Considering the smaller machinery that's used for the protected bike lanes, even though they may only be displacing, 2 or 3 inches, they're creating a problem at the curb cuts. Would it be unreasonable to request that they do the curb cuts as they're doing the bike lane?
I will defer to my expert colleague on that, on kind of the mechanics of the protected and the curb cuts.
So do you mean actually the cross pan of the curb cut?
Correct.
The side would be? Yeah, I think there's efficiency gained in just going straight, right? And so right now we're in a place where resources are stretched pretty far to just meet the goals that are defined here. So that would be a resource question, because we would have to go a little out of direction. And so there'd be an impact there to the number of people that could.
But do you understand what I'm saying? Even though you might have to slow that process down, you're creating another problem by adding the snow near the curb cut. So, just something.
Failing to maintain an it's an ADA violation. It's failing to maintain an accessible feature.
Well, and plowing does that as well, just the traditional plowing. And even when there's not an adjacent bike lane, the snow is being pushed out of the way by the spreader. So I hear what you're saying. It is literally moving the problem to another place.
Right.
But just with the bike lanes though, the problem is like downtown used to be like the one place you could actually get around, but now because of these bike lanes, we can't get anywhere, even downtown, even in the areas where like that used to work, or even, so it's actually made accessibility worse.
Mm-hmm. What they do try and do, and we do this quite a bit at night, is our team will come in and do as much hauling as they can. So if there's been snow plowed off towards a sidewalk or into a even parking lane, we try and come in overnight and haul that out. And over that last snow, we removed tons and tons and tons. So, but it's a process. So it's especially like Nick said, the conditions vary. It could be, fairly immediate, or it could take several days to get through that.
And the second question is, considering we have sophisticated weather 10-day forecast now, I'm just curious, when you see a snowstorm coming, and then you see the long range forecast that said it's going to be below freezing for a week, do you change your strategy? I'm just curious, because that seems to be when we're in the biggest problems. We could have the smallest snowstorm, but if it freezes for a week or two, that's the one that's causing the biggest problem. It's not the depth, it's the freezing. So do you guys change strategy when you see that?
Yeah, 100%. In the case of the storm on December 28th into the 29th, that forecast was off. It was much more intense of a storm than any of our outlets were predicting. And so, and you had the freeze ahead of that storm. So it was a little bit warmer compared to the negative 14 degrees that we'd had prior to that. But we always, especially I would say with the residential snowplow program, we typically will deploy a full deployment of our heavy plows if we're anticipating any meaningful accumulation, but where that meaningful long cold and the ground temps, whether the ground temps will have a prolonged cold, really will dictate whether we deploy RSP and how long we deploy RSP. Like Nick said, we can either do just the 12-hour shift and then come back and do another 12-hour shift, just starting at the 3 a.m., or we can go around the clock. And that is really dictated by what we see in terms of how long that snow will stay on the ground.
I hate to be a hog. I've got one more question. These snowstorms in comparison were very small. We're talking 6 to 8 inches. We know we're going to get a big one in the next decade, and this is going to happen. Do you have a catastrophic plan where you're going to have to add resources and get these sidewalks open? Because my community is going to be stuck in for a week or two, and that actually becomes a medical issue. It becomes a health issue. So I'm curious if you guys have plans for a catastrophic snowstorm and what resources would be put toward that.
Right, so even in that case, the sidewalk would be the responsibility of the adjacent property owner. But in terms of the streets and the areas that we do plow, in residential areas, we do have emergency plans. In most cases, we would focus on the A's and the B's, and those are routes, I'm getting a little bit detailed, but those are the streets with the stripes that are chosen specifically for their access to main highways or main routes and access to hospitals, schools. So we will always start there. And in the case of a heavy storm, we deploy all of our resources to focus on those things first, and then continue to widen them out and focus on them until they're passable, and then move on to other things.
Right. I think, Joe, you actually had your hand up. Did you get your question answered?
Well, yeah, my point was, in my neighborhood, we have very wide streets, and some people shovel right away and some people are in Tahiti, I don't know where, but what everybody was claiming me about is if you drive your snowplow F-150 down the middle of the street, then you're basically, in my neighborhood, everybody's complaining they're landlocked on their block because they couldn't get through the snow. I don't know how you solve that. And it snows in Denver, I realize that. But I don't know if you can make the property owners actually shovel a little bit more than exactly to the edge of their sidewalk. I don't see any other way to do it. But that was a real problem in this past snow, that you just couldn't get off your block. And I think people were referring to that on the protected bike lanes. So we help create a new problem in some cases. And that's all, just, it's been mentioned. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think classically you have your heaviest storms in the spring, and those we can bounce back from typically faster because the ground temps are warmer and they melt faster. And what we're seeing more of now are heavier snows earlier in the winter, where you do have those prolonged temps. So it's forcing us to ask questions about our deployment strategies, and that's going to have resource conversations behind those questions.
So one really quick point on this, particularly distinguishing between what are like real catastrophic events, like what happened in Buffalo in December, versus what might be just a dose of like a slightly heavy snowfall. And there, when it comes to really catastrophic snow events that take place, like what took place in Buffalo, where a place that typically gets a lot of snow normally, but the catastrophic event that they had in December there wasn't a single plan that was able to sort of bail them out of that, because at the end of the day, people were still out on the streets when the National Guard and the police and other emergency first responders and snowplows and everything were working to get either streets plowed or any sort of resources to people that truly needed them. And so it's, we can put together the
Nick,
best
before you
plans in
share
place.
your password, you're still sharing your screen, FYI.
Thank you.
Just want to go for the save there before that's out on YouTube.
Alan, you're
Want
too
me to remove
nice.
you as a cost?
I will figure it out.
Sorry, Earl. Sorry to interrupt.
I am a Teams man.
But yes, to the point that I was trying to make is, you can have plans all you want, but I think when it comes to catastrophic situations like what happened in Buffalo, it literally comes down to a borderline level of common sense of what is the situation on the ground and what is feasibility like able to be done.
We do spin up our emergency operations center when we're expecting a heavy storm. And that in itself is a way to make sure that we've got different forces and different resources teed up to coordinate with one another and make sure that those lines of communication are open. So we did that for the series of bomb cyclones that happened a couple of years ago, the blizzard in February of 21. So that is another option, but I agree with Earl. There are some things that we do try and communicate to the public, like stay home as much as you can, plan for the storm, that we hope people will take heed of.
Alan?
Two general strings of questions. The first is, think about accessibility for our neighbors and residents that, use wheelchairs. Places like 38th Avenue and Sheridan, over here in North Denver, sidewalk abuts up to the curb, and the current policy is we're plowing snow onto that, and Colfax too over here, and it makes the sidewalks completely inaccessible. So folks are having to either walk in the street or use their wheelchairs and roll in the street. I was wondering if you guys have seen any other best practices from other cities around the country that do not plow up onto the curb. Or if there's other ways that we could maybe make those spaces more accessible where the sidewalk is truly right on the street.
I mean, sometimes we can't get all the way up to the curb because of on-street parking. There's a lot of good reasons to have on-street parking from a variety of reasons, but I think we're looking at best practices all the time. And like I said, this was in a previous question as well, it's a fine balance because the snow has to move somewhere. So I think trying to make sure that we've identified where that impact is the greatest, and then immediately sending out those hauling teams to make sure that they can get out and try and remove that to mitigate the damage or the impacts as much as possible, as quickly as possible, is one of the ways that we try and make that happen, especially in areas where they're relying on a lot of walkability, or you have transit stations or connections to schools, like I mentioned before. So to an extent, it's prioritization. And that's really trying to put those resources to places we know that connection is most meaningful. It's meaningful to everyone, but there are some places where we know people have to get first. And so we do have to make some choices.
Thanks. And again, just encourage the department to look at if there's alternatives instead of plowing onto the sidewalks on, again, 38th or Sheridan, plowing the center, whatever options might be. But the other question was around accessibility for other than protected bike lane facilities. Has there been any conversations around potentially plowing some of the neighborhood bikeways or some of the bike lanes that are around the city? Are there any potential, certainly that's a resource question, but has that even been discussed amongst city leadership?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the gold standard. That's where we would like to get, is to make sure that we can say these were put in for high ease of use, regardless of the conditions outside. We're just not there right now with our level of resources, and we want to be able to communicate more clearly about what you can expect in a snowstorm. The metrics that you saw in the presentation, the 12 hours, we should be able to hit every protected lane every 12 hours. That really depends on the amount of snow that fell. So we're trying to make sure that we can resource what we've put into the ground, what we've installed over the last few years, because we have had a huge push to install bike lanes. And we have not, that 125-mile commitment, we did not meet that on the operations side. So we have done as much as we can to be as efficient as we can. And I'm really proud of what the team's been able to accomplish. But we're just not quite there to say that we can do that in neighborhood bikeways. But I think that the department, it aligns with our goals. It aligns with our values. So it's something that we want to strive to in the future. I just don't have a timeline on it.
Thank you.
I had maybe it's more of a thought than a question, but there's a gender study that and this is a bit of an equity issue, but a gender study that a town in Sweden did that was highlighted in a book called Invisible Women, that talked about kind of equity issues with snow plowing. And this town in Sweden actually found that plowing arterials first resulted in higher emergency room visits, particularly from women, than plowing side streets. And I know this is CPD, but clearing sidewalks. So I'm not necessarily suggesting a change. I think that there's some differences in transportation in Sweden than Denver. But I think that would be interesting to explore, particularly as we talk about some of these equity issues and trying to adjust some of these long held patterns. But I know basically the study concluded that walking on 2 inches of snow resulted in drastically more emergency room visits than driving on 2 inches of snow. And so I think that that's where I know we're resource limited, but it might be worth spinning this on its head and saying, hey, do we actually need to relook at, does it really make sense to do arterials first? And are we attempting to save lives, but we're actually, or reduce serious injury, but the injuries are coming from somewhere else. And that's something, I don't know if the department's looked into that, but that is something I'd love to recommend as something to look into, that Swedish gender study on snow plowing. I found it was fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it's leave it to the Swedes, man, to look at things a little bit different. I'd love to read it. It does sound really interesting. I do think that there's an argument to be made for making sure that your main roadways that connect to hospitals are done first. That's pretty classic across snow programs. And I don't know the parameters of the study, but it's definitely, we're always open to different ways of thinking about things. So it may open up some thinking, but it does go back to a property owner adjacent responsibility to make sure that they are doing what they can on at least those sidewalks. And yes, the roadways are our responsibility too. And so having a broader community conversation about the level of service of residential plowing, how often that's deployed, because we don't deploy that every snow. It takes a meaningful snow for us to deploy that. Again, I mean, the name of the game are resource conversations around this, but these are, it's come up in politics already this season. We've all seen it. So it's definitely something that is a quality of life issue for everyone, and we should continue to weigh in on it and think about it differently. But right now, this is best practice to clear what we call the A's and super A's and B's first. But I'd love to see what they had to say in their study. You can shoot it over to Nick, then I'll get a hold of it.
Will do.
Cool.
Sorry, I had one more question, Jake. I'll make it quick. Nick, Cindy, has there been any thought about, you mentioned doing liquid de-icer downtown. Has there been any more thought about expanding that beyond downtown with, brine like Fort Collins does or anything like that to reduce particulate matter air pollution elsewhere in the city?
Yeah, actually the materials, the variety of materials that we use, it's kind of a game, and it really does depend on the conditions. So if it's really wet outside, that may be more of an aggregate than a liquid de-icer or a different type of de-icer, because it won't work. So we look at how the conditions of the pavement. It's not necessarily a geographic generality. It's really how the pavement is going to respond and what the timing of our team is. Since we're making those passes every 12 hours, we got to make a game time call. And if it's really, really wet or raining, then we know that most of that de-icer is going to get washed away before it's meaningful. So in that case, we may, like on a bridge where it's going to have more impact, we may lean towards aggregate understanding that that may have more impact from a PM10 standpoint, but it's going to be more effective in that moment. We just try not to use that everywhere. So it really depends on conditions and location.
Thank you.
We go through a lot of materials. If anyone is ever interested in a tour, I'm happy to take you to see the dome. We fill it up at the beginning of the season. It's already almost, I mean, we have enough materials for any circumstance, but you can see how during the season that pile gets lower and lower and then replenish. So don't worry, we have materials.
I appreciate that, Cindy. We never get invited on field trips.
Oh, it's fun out there. We can show you how we mount a plow. It's just the mechanics behind what it takes to get it done. It's a symphony of different heavy machinery. And then to Nick's point, also a really great, exciting volunteer group of people who just have never done anything like that. They're used to working at desks, and we give them an opportunity to get out and serve in that way. And it's really fun.
All right, we're a little over time, so I'll give our one last question to Lucia.
Well, this is sort of a general question. Just I actually think a field trip is a very good idea. Maybe we could organize something in the summer and we could see plowing and different things that DOTI does, just so we can have a better understanding.
Awesome. We save that note for our actions items list later, Lucia. Awesome. With that, I do have to apologize to Justin. We ate into your time a little bit here, but snow plowing is a pretty hot topic. So Justin, if you can take it away on the Dr. Cog update.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I will attempt to share my screen. If you don't see what I think you're seeing and I'll flag that, just let me know. Actually, I don't have permission, so you'll have to allow me.
Yes, I am going to make a co-host right now. Let me know if you can share your screen now.
I can. Thank you. All right. I trust everybody can see my title screen. Everybody, Justin Begley. I'm a multimodal planning supervisor for the city. I work in a lot of different spaces. One that I've spent some time in recent years is working on regional planning with Dr. Cog. See if I can advance that slide. There we go. As part of that regional planning, one of the things Dr. Cog does as the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the Denver Metro, is administer federal transportation dollars, abbreviated as TIP. It's called the Transportation Improvement Program. I'll give you a brief overview of it. I'm also going to give you a little bit of a snapshot in time about where we are right now. A lot of acronyms. I'll do my best to unpack those and explain what they mean. Feel free to ask in real time or pause me or hold for the end, but I have about 10 or 12 slides to get through. So trust most folks know who Dr. Cog is and the role they play. Again, federal government collects in the Transportation Trust Fund revenues nationally that are then flowed back either made available as discretionary grants. An example of a discretionary grant would be like the RAISE grant that went to the Washington Street project. Everybody competed to the feds and Denver secured funds. Other monies are given to the various cities and metros in the country via formula. And the TIP process that Dr. Cog runs is to identify what it defines as the best investments for the region. It's got a very long established and well prescribed process for that, and we're part of it. How often does it occur, this TIP process? In some places they do it every year. They update the TIP. In this metro, they do it once every 4 years. And each of the 8 member counties is what's known as they reclassify them as a subregion. So Denver is a city county, so it is considered a subregion for the purposes of this. The forum we're talking about is the required body. Dr. Cog asks or requires us as the city of and county of Denver to administer the process on behalf of Denver Metro. So it's convoluted. It probably deserves a graphic, but I hope you can bear with me as we get through here. I'm going to rewind a little bit in terms of where we were about 4 years ago. Similar to that process where everybody kind of applies to a central body and then they administer funds. That's also how DRCOG used to do it in the region. They moved to what's called a dual model. It says it's new here. It's our second cycle with that now. Basically, they take a little bit of that money and they move it on the side and they put it for specific programs, but then they flow the money into a regional pot, which are projects that are across multiple counties, benefit the region as a whole. And then they flow by formula money to each of the 8 subregions for it to run its own process to come up with a recommended slate of projects to then recommend to the full DRCOG board for funding. So with any federal money comes strings, and there's no shortage of strings here. We have the federal strings with this money. We also have the DRCOG layered strings that come with it. So what are the strings? What are our requirements to run the sub-regional forum? This is not a city, you know, Denver happens to be a city county. Broomfield is the only other one like that. But in places like Jefferson County, Arapahoe, Douglas County, they hold countywide forums with their member jurisdictions and they meet and coordinate on priorities. So we have to have these meetings as well. They are conducted under an extension of DRCOG's governance. So they tell us how we're going to run these meetings essentially. The forum and any formal subcommittees are publicly noticed meetings. We've been doing this going back to 2018, 2019 when we were meeting in person, and we've always had public attend. Almost every meeting we've had, and we routinely have public comment. DOTI does this on behalf of the city, right? So this is DOTI staff facilitates the forum, but DOTI conducts a region-wide process, and actually it's more than just the city that's eligible. You have RTD that's eligible, CDOT, universities, transportation management associations, others can all apply for this money. So we hold on behalf of the bigger DRCOG bubble a public call for projects where we solicit for the best federal aid eligible organizations in the Denver Metro to apply for projects. And we're also encouraged to maintain a link to the long-range transportation plan. It's called MetroVision. It is a fiscally constrained plan that DRCOG has to develop with projects in it that demonstrate conformity with air quality requirements, as well as fitting within the anticipated revenues that are supposed to come to the region by 2050. So this is a long-range plan, but we have very near-term projects and priorities in it. So my first kind of visualization here, which helps understand it a little bit. So that forum, its role is to make the recommendation to DRCOG's board of what the Denver city and county priorities are. It is supported with a technical subcommittee who makes recommendations to that forum. It also works to review the work product that is done through the process of accepting applications and reviewing them for comparison to the DRCOG criteria for what a good project is supposed to look like. So we have folks scoring applications that come in. At the city level, we have a multi-departmental coordination team and others that we're working with our partners to say, you know, what are the projects that we can advance as a region, and even leveraging investments from RTD, CDOT, and others. So it's a very big dance, a bit of a complicated dance, but it is both local and regional at once. So this. What are we trying to do at DOTI? So now I'm going to pivot from our responsibilities at the regional level, right? So the city as a whole, and say, what is DOTI looking for when it identifies project priorities to attach this federal formula funding to? So I will tell you, and I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of people, federally funded projects drive a lot of people nuts because a lot of strings, a lot of requirements that come with them. So we can't just take any project, nor should we want to take any project and put a federal dollar into it, because it is somewhat distinct process we have to go through compared to how DOTI typically delivers. And I know there's been frustration over time on how fast DOTI can deliver projects. Federalization adds time and money to a project, cost to a project, I should say, in exchange for the federal money to help make it happen. So we have to be really certain about the projects that we federalize and put forward here. We're also looking for projects like, can we advance a phase of a project, the design phase, a construction phase? We want to see things get built, but sometimes projects are very large and expensive, and you need to think long-term about how they're implemented. I mentioned federal funds add time and cost to a project. There has to be a lot of consideration on whether that's wise to do. So we won't try to federalize a $100,000 project because we're going to make that project cost twice as much and take 4 times as long as if we were just otherwise funded locally. That's a rough example, but it's kind of the way it works. And so what happens is Dr. Cog manages the calls. And in that process, we have a representative from Community Planning and Development, our Parks Department, and DOTI, who are 3 of our primary transportation interested departments in the city, a staff member, and public input used to inform a recommended package of projects. And I know we had a comment earlier about public input and what role it plays. A couple things I can say there. Public input is absolutely recognized and read and understood for what's in the content of that public input in terms of how we can make something better or make it an improved place from where we might have originally started a project with the public's input. I tend not to rely too much on quantity, but more what's in that comment. I know for the project mentioned earlier, Pena, there's a lot of comments there, absolutely a ton of comments. A lot of them are centered around the idea that the city shouldn't be expanding any capacity whatsoever in any shape or form. And it should instead, improve the A line to the airport and other improvements. There were some comments about, the timing of the project and should we be investing in it at this stage. I suspect there's going to be more questions there, so I'll hold off to see if I can answer those later. But I want to say, yes, public comment matters. And we look at what the public comment says and how it can help shape a project. Dr. Cog's criteria in the applications that we are supposed to fill out, the city has filled out several applications. CDOT also filled out an application to submit for our subregion. Basically, what are the criteria? Subregional impact, how many people are benefiting from a particular improvement? Is it a priority in the long-range transportation plan? You can see what those are there. I won't read them to you. Do we leverage additional funds by attaching some of the region's transportation money to a project? To the extent we can help close a gap in an existing project, that actually scores higher than a project in which we're seeking to almost fund the whole project with these dollars. And then project readiness, ready for phase, match, public support, those all weigh into a scoring about 10% of the total project value. So call 4 is what I had mentioned at the outset, is where we are today. We've already administered 3 calls for projects. This is when Dr. Cog says we have a window of time and here's some money available. Submit your best applications for these projects. So call 4, which has just concluded. Here are the projects that have been submitted and turned back to us from Dr. Cog saying these are eligible uses of these funds. So I'll let this sit up here. I'll briefly describe these projects. Alameda Underpass is a project that's going to seek to reconstruct this 100-year-old facility. It's falling apart. I know there's a bond project in the short term to help patch it up, but we need a long-term answer to this piece of infrastructure. The Colfax Bus Rapid Transit project is a project that we hope to see implemented. Well, it should be implemented in the coming years. It's got a pretty big price tag, and we're seeking construction funds to help make that whole. The 15th Street Multimodal Extension, this is a project that was within the Central Community Transportation Network construction package, basically in the area of the downtown core. Parts of that are moving forward to funding. We have another unfunded section. This is a high priority project that didn't have funding that we're seeking to advance for TIP dollars. We have the Highline Canal at Yale. This is a connection across that facility. We have North Broadway multimodal. This is the, so we have a project under construction on the south section of Broadway connecting the station area up into Cherry Creek. This is to start the design on the northern section so we can continue that bike facility and other infrastructure intersection improvements. We have the North Central CTN, so moving north of the downtown in the Globeville and Elyria Swansea neighborhoods. We have a CTN package getting ready for planning and construction there. We need more money for that. And then we have a sidewalk project on Sheridan, which has all kinds of sidewalk needs, but this happens to be the section north of I-70. Those were DOTI's projects that were submitted. We have the Parks team has submitted 3 trail sections. Another section of the South Platte River Trail from Mississippi to Florida, a trail section in the northeast of Denver, the Derby Lateral Trail, and then another Highline Canal connection it wants to do in coordination with Arapahoe County. We have the Den Airport has submitted the Pena Boulevard I-70 to 470 managed lane project. That funding is for completing a study and design work on a future managed lane facility to ensure free flow between this section of on Pena between 70 and 470. So it also has a multi-use path as part of that in the TDM program, but that's secondary to, I think, what most people care about, which is the managed lanes and the concerns over those. And then finally, CDOT's Federal Boulevard BRT was very successful. Won $35 million the last call. They're looking for more money for that, so they've submitted that to us. All this is to say this is about $70 or $80 million worth of projects. We have about 46 million to program. I won't worry anybody with these acronyms, just know that there's a couple different buckets and colors of money, but to keep us moving. This is kind of the overview of where we are call 4. In terms of our schedule, we are moving beyond the applications being scored into a recommendation. So we're here moving into middle of late February, and then we need to get a recommendation to the board by next month. So our forum will meet and take the content of the scoring, the public input, the recommendations from the technical subcommittee, and make a recommendation. Just a brief overview on what's been applied for in terms of the types of projects. So we had a safety and state of good repair project, that's the Alameda Underpass. We have transit, that's the Colfax BRT. We have a number of bike ped projects by virtue of the Parks Trails projects, as well as the DOTI submitted ones. And we have the capacity project submitted by DEN. And another way to look at this is by dollar amount, what's been submitted. $43 million of bike ped projects, 20 million in ask for transit, 7.8 million in state of good repair, and 5 million for capacity. And the phases of projects. So predominantly construction here. This money will be used in many cases to get things in the ground. So just going to round out my presentation by saying, timing wise, we're between that February and March timeframe. We're going to have a list of projects. We're going to have a technical subcommittee recommendation. And then we have to meet that March deadline. And then the tip adoption actually doesn't happen until August. There's quite a bit to happen before here and there. But will conclude about 18 months and $150 million of dollars being. And with that, I will conclude my presentation and be happy to answer any questions.
Julie?
Yeah, thank you. This was really interesting. I'd never heard of this, although I'd heard of some of the projects. You said during your presentation, like, yes, we take in public comment, but I'm wondering, I don't know if you were here when you heard the person who spoke to us during public comment who said there was a ton of opposition and now it's being considered again. Could you tell us like how that could happen? Like if there's and again, there might be opposition and it might be that that the city or whoever decides, or DRCOG decides, well, we know there's opposition, we're going to do it anyway. But is there could you maybe walk us through like how that happens? And is there ever like a public explanation if there is a lot of opposition where someone says, we hear your opposition, kind of like, I'm thinking like Federal Register, we know you said this, our response is XYZ.
Yeah, it's a good question. At this stage of the process, we are sent the comments from DRCOG, so we can kind of go through them and say, you know, what is the public saying? What is the reaction to this project? You know, there's a few consistent themes in these, and to the extent we can get some comment in and use it to make something better, we will. I will say the bulk of the comments that have come in have been about just stop, don't build this project. And it's largely based on a philosophical, you know, desire to no longer build lanes in Denver, which is not what.
So like it's don't build anything, not don't build the, not, we don't like this specific thing for this reason.
It's a mix. It is a mix. But I would say, you know, to your question specifically, like the airport who has submitted this project has committed to engaging with the stakeholders who have concerns about the project. And I think that's something the forum has actually put some pressure on them to do, get them to be, you know, they have reached out and said, we want to understand what the concerns of the project. We want to work with folks specifically about things that we can change, right, to make it better. Just to give you an example, this project was originally conceived as just an additional lane in each direction, and it moved to a managed lane. And I know some people have a problem with managed lanes as well, but what a managed lane will do is ensure free flow at any time of day for emergency vehicles, for bus transit, for cargo, for people who absolutely have to make a connection at the airport they can't miss. So I would say public input has already made this project better. For some folks, it's not going to be made better until it goes away, but that's an example of how public input can help make something better, and something the airport is going to be doing as they bring this project along, informed by public comment.
Alan?
Justin, I just want to first of all applaud the city for coming up with this list of projects. It's really exciting to see that this list, I think, is really reflective of the city's values, of seeing the money being put towards, the city said we're prioritizing, we're valuing multimodal, and it's great to see that. So I just want to applaud you and the rest of the team for that. Specifically the sidewalk next to Willis Case, that's really exciting for us here in North Denver, where there are no sidewalks there right now on a really dangerous stretch of road. I guess my only question to you is, for folks like Dr. Mintzer that commented before that do want to engage with the airport on Pena, is there a specific public meeting coming up or methodology or way that they can specifically connect with DEN to learn more or engage on that in particular?
Yes, so they're in a pre-design place right now where they're kind of in a more technical and analytical process, but when they start to develop alternatives, right, because that's what they're going to have to do, is say, you know, here's what it looks like with a managed lane, here's what it might look like if we don't do nothing. That part is going to have to go to the public, and they're going to have to work, you know, pretty hand in hand with folks. I will tell you, it's likely they're going to want to work with folks who both agree and disagree, but it's also going to be with folks directly impacted by the corridor, right? So if there is somebody who is impacted because of frontage or they have a negative impact directly from the implementation of this, they're going to be engaging with those folks. The airport is well aware of some of the concerns the public has put forward and some of the folks who have advanced them, and they will be reaching out to work with those folks as those projects come online.
Thank you.
So I'll make a commitment to say, coming out of this meeting, you know, we continue to hear the concerns about the project, and we need a commitment, should this project advance, that you're going to work with those stakeholders to ensure their concerns are heard.
Lucia?
Hi, yeah, thank you for your presentation. There's a couple of things I'd just like to say. You were describing the opposition as people who are just philosophically opposed to adding lanes. And I feel like that's really dismissive, there are many, many places in the world where they are choosing not to add extra lanes and are looking at other ways of moving people around other than single occupancy vehicles. And it went along with another comment that said that people, the only thing they didn't want to see any expansion of any kind. And that is simply not true. We want to find ways of getting more people out to the airport without them having to be in a single occupancy vehicle. So whether that means maybe getting 2 tracks for the A line so that it can run more frequently, or having a better bicycle facility to get out there, or even better buses if need be, because the A line has been shut down quite a bit in the last few days. You know, we all know about induced demand. If you build it, they will come. So if you build more lanes for cars, will you then need to build more parking, because then more cars will come out there? So I don't really think it's just a philosophical comment about not wanting to have lanes. It's just the way of the future is not single occupancy vehicles. And if we are to reach our climate goals, then we have to reduce our vehicle miles traveled, whether it be EVs or motorized vehicles. But adding lanes, in my opinion, is only adding to the problem, not helping.
Your comments are well taken. And I apologize if I didn't mean to be dismissive by any means. Just simply trying to kind of translate what was coming through in the comments. And the one thing I would say, and I'm not here to defend or do anything about a project, I believe the idea here is that with the gate expansion and the expansion at the airport, the airport's case is that all potential avenues to access and egress the airport need to be evaluated, and that's what's being looked at in their study. They're not looking at double tracking the A line as part of this, but certainly nothing precludes that. And it certainly is going to have to be considered in the future as well. So apologize if I came across a certain way, but know that this is not an exclusive conversation around one thing over another.
I don't necessarily think it's you personally coming across in a certain way. It's sort of the general attitude of engineers and the people who are actually doing this that just seems very restrictive. Like, I've got my guidebook, I've got to do this. It's just very, well, let's just say it lacks vision. That's how I feel about it, but thank you.
I'd like to ask a question, not seeing any other hands. Just from a strategic standpoint with DRCOG, and like you said, federal dollars, 1, hard to get, 2, complicated when you get them. I'm a little curious about, obviously with DEN being its own enterprise, they have ability to fund projects that the rest of the city does not. So I'm just a little curious about like what goes into the strategic decision of I don't know if that's money that the city could have advocated for another project, and that's kind of what I'm curious about, is why a DEN project in our bed, not even about this specific DEN project, just philosophically.
Yeah, I think what I've been told is that DEN has funded as much as it is permitted to by the Federal Aviation Administration based on the amount of airport direct travel that happens on Pena. So there's something, roughly on the order of a, 75% airport and 25% local travel on the corridor. And so the FAA has prohibited the airport from expending any other airport revenues towards the portion it sees of Pena that is not carrying airport travel. So that's why the airport has been working with DRCOG, as I understand, going back years, to get the project on the long range transportation list, saying that, looking forward with the expansion plan for the airport and the constraints on the corridor, that they're going to have to find a way to move more people. And it's going to take many different ways to move them. And so that's why I believe, or what I've been told, is the reason the airport is pursuing DRCOG funds for this.
No, that's really informative. Thank you. And then I did have just one last separate question, and that was, when does the next round of this kick off? I know that these are the current projects, they're under review. Is that 2 years from now? Like, I believe that's the normal cycle, but just wanted to get, for those that are curious about when they should start thinking about the next round.
Yeah, two years from now, we'll start the wheels turning again, so to speak. And then the public process will probably start within the year after that. So then another 4 years of federal funds can be programmed out.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions or comments for Justin? All right, seeing none, thank you very much for your time, Justin. All right, now we'll be handing it over to the Policy and Operations Committee report out. I believe, Lucia, you're covering for Jamie since Jamie had to step away. I believe you're on mute.
Do we have Earl next, Jake?
Yeah.
Oh,
For the
sorry.
budget?
We
Oh,
do. I'm so
okay.
sorry.
Go ahead, Earl.
Yes, we do have Earl next.
Well, let me make you a co-host.
Thanks, Alan.
But if Earl needs to duck away for Valentine's Day dinner, we can clearly punt this to next month.
No, you're fine. I actually, it might actually be better that we punt this because we're, as a department, working through a number of changes to the budget development process. And so I think that we'll have a more sort of fruitful update next month that we can consolidate and have in like less than 10 minutes. How about that?
Earl, one question for you from our budget finance committee. Would it be helpful if we work on drafting some feedback or letters or comment to you either before next month or following next month's update?
If you want to draft a letter or potential comments to, I'm sorry, my light is off. If you want to draft a letter of comments or items that you would like to have for consideration for or in advance of the next meeting, we have the planning meetings now prior to the actual official meetings. And so I think that could be an opportunity for the team to work to get those comments and either the comments or the letter in advance of that meeting. So that way we can work to incorporate that into next month's presentation.
Great, thank you. Nick, were you trying to talk? We couldn't hear you there.
Yeah, I'm really nailing it today. No, I was just saying, Alan, yeah, I think that would be very helpful for kind of framing our conversations going forward. I think that would be great.
Right.
Great, so we'll look at spinning up the budget finance committee again, and anyone here tonight or even not here tonight is welcome to join in on that conversation to help kind of shape direction of what kind of policies from a budgetary standpoint, what kind of values that you'd like to see more emphasized in the 2024 budget cycle.
Any opposition from the board to moving that budget conversation? All right.
Or any questions for Earl or Nick while we're on the topic?
All right, cool. I just wanted to make sure we didn't skip any opportunities for questions that anyone had. Now, Lucia, like Nick, I'm also having a hard time. I think my coffee's wearing off, so I'll head back to you.
We actually met twice. It was so nice. We met twice. So the first meeting I actually missed, so I'm going off of somebody else's notes. And I guess we didn't really get finished. They were concerned about red light cameras, things like that. But I'm just going to comment on the notes from the meeting that I was at. And, we had a couple things like Gary. Is Gary here tonight? I don't see Gary.
No.
But anyway, he had a few things, you know, he wrote a memo on red light cameras after the last meeting, and he had suggested approaches on various problems. We also discussed the formal response from DOTI regarding the I-25 project, but that came out today, which was that's pretty timely. We also would like to see the EISs and maybe EASs from various projects, from especially the larger ones, well, the ones that actually trigger those, and as well as reviewing the purpose and need statements that are the pivotal goals for the project. You know, because judgment made by federal funding authority at what level of environmental documentation is required. Anyway, and we want to reach out to the director. Perhaps we need to reach out to the director as to what, you know, what are the major projects and how can we help? You know, how can we help you? Is there a way we can help you? And then the other item he had is, you know, whenever a high accident intersection appears on the news, you know, when something that is like that rises to like journalistic attention, then, you know, we really need to alert the politicos and respond. I think there was a little feeling that DOTI has been less responsive lately, and, you know, maybe it's a manpower issue. And Jake was also, you know, chiming in that we need sort of basic answers to questions regarding projects. Again, going back to this response issue, we want to be seen as an advisory board as more, you know, more of an asset than, rather, this is somebody else's term, you know, rather than an annoying brother. We want to be able to help if we can, with what we're bringing in from the community as well. And then we had an issue, 311 just is not functioning. You can log on and check a ticket that you had, to type in the ticket number, says there's no ticket number, you know, in my, for example, gosh, just lots of stuff. And we'll be happy to take like nominations at the end of the meetings for items that we need to follow up on, because there's just a lot. And hope I haven't bored you too much with it.
Any other comments from any other members of the policy committee too? I know Jamie's out.
Yeah, this is Joe. Just we're trying to be more responsive and also more helpful. So we're a little bit, you know, kind of on the side, we think. So we got to do that. We have to have some action items from this meeting, so we really can follow through on things. And we really, you know, our heart's into this stuff. We want to do right for everybody. So right now we feel just a little bit on the side. So this meeting has been a lot better than most. So I'm glad of that. And hopefully at the end, we can again have some issues that we want to bring up again and make sure that they aren't left by the side of the road, so to speak.
Awesome. Thank you very much for the update from the policy committee. With that being said, we're going to go into our next agenda topic, which is the action items list. I do have to give Joe some credit for inspiring this idea, as well, describing some of the ways that they work in their business really helped kind of initiate this item. So I think, you know, we've had a lot of conversations both as different subcommittees, as a board as whole. I know Jonathan, Allen, and I have also had conversations about, you know, there's a lot of topics that we talk about that are really tied to something timely. And then there's some things that we're working on a long-term horizon. So the action items list is ideally a place that we as a board can put items that come up in meetings that require further steps from either us as a board or the department itself in order to track and make progress against those items. This is also a place where if the department's open to it, they could create action items for subcommittees as well for things that they need help with. So this is really a way for us to make progress on key items, as well as open up a a real good two-way street to make progress from things that the department needs help from or things that the board needs from the department as well. So that's kind of what our action items list will serve the purpose of. Jonathan and Alan, anything you think I missed from that overview? All right. I like their unanimous hand on face no's, but great. I think, you know, with that, this is something that'll be a bit of an experiment, and so we can adapt this process as we go. But, you know, kicking things off, are there any key action items that we have out of this meeting or on recent meetings that we want to call attention to or add to the action item list?
I would say two of them that this is a bad example because they've in a way just been closed is two open ones that we wanted to be sure we got updates on both I-25 Broadway and sidewalks. But we've sort of resolved that by making it an agenda item on the next meeting and having a preliminary update now. We've had in the past other items like that where we wanted some sort of update, but on a smaller item and never really cleared it. But in this case, we did, fortunately.
Yeah, and I had on the 13th and 14th Avenue, some of the citizenry is again wanting to see some more action or what can be done. And so I'd like to somehow have a follow-up on that as to what is going on for the safety on those streets.
Joe, is that an action item that you're running with, or that you're waiting for something from the department on?
A little bit of both, but I probably put it more in their court than mine. So not because I'm lazy, but because I don't know enough.
I guess to try to clarify an action there, I'm wondering, you're right, Joe. I mean, you've taken the mantle of saying, I want to know more about this, but ultimately the information can't come from you as a source. Wondering if anyone from the department on the line can tell us who's the best contact for Joe to reach out to follow up on questions around any current or future plans for 13th and 14th. So we can get back to some of those public commenters on it. That way we can just set up the action of Joe following up with whoever this is.
Let's go through Nanita. We've got a team that's working on that. And I know we've been working with Councilwoman Sawyer pretty closely on how we're going to address that on there. So maybe if we go through Nanita, we can talk at our executive committee meeting on that if we want a formal item or on that. But if we funnel it through Nanita, I can make sure it gets to that project team, start getting questions answered.
That's good. There's actually a meeting coming up in Amanda Sawyer's district on the 15th. I thought so. So I think we'll have more information from that. But again, just want to make sure that information is conveyed to everybody and things like that. So that can be in my court for that, but hoping that your presentation will answer a lot of questions, right? So again, guys, that's, I think, the 15th of next month. So I don't know when this meeting is, might be at the same time, but I'll report on that when I
think
get
that'll
that
probably be
information.
barely after our meeting, but I think that's actually, this would be good because I know we've had public comment around this and we've all been sort of wondering what to report back. In this case, it sounds like you might actually get sufficient info from another existing public meeting. But even if that becomes the case, I think it would be helpful for at least you to report out here what you learned there, and so that the participants, the viewers of this meeting, and not to mention the board itself, know the latest and can share back.
Agreed. Yeah, you can put that in my court.
I think that right there is the best example of what we're hoping this action items list can look like. So, you know, I don't know if there are other items that come to mind from, you know, the report out from Nick, the snow plowing update, the DRCOG update. Sorry, I'm running through the agenda just to spark ideas.
I think I actually have one. It wasn't clearly identified as an action item, but it's something that's come up a few times. So I wonder if we can develop one here. I know that this is not the Department of Transportation Infrastructure. I'd be interested to know who it is that we should follow up with, but this issue of 311 reporting not accepting non-addresses, even though it actually prompts you for things like intersections. Like for instance, I put in a ticket, it says, tell us the intersection. I put in the intersection and it gets closed because there's no address. This is something that's come up in public comment. We brought it up a few times before. I guess I'm wondering who we should follow up with, who does control that we can say, what's going on here? Could we either, I mean, I would say the expedient but not so great solution would be removing the option of putting in intersections. The better solution would be allowing us to identify locations that might not have an address but are definitely findable with the information provided. Which department or who should we follow up with on that?
So that's technical services, or technology services, TS. They manage the 311 program. And I tell you what, if Julie or if you, Jonathan, want to shoot me a note, just kind of with your experience, I'm happy to kind of be a go-between with the director over the 311 service. And that probably be the most efficient way.
I will. Can you put your email in the chat?
Certainly.
Yeah, I actually wrote my my council person before and said who because I went on the website to look for that community planning thing and I couldn't find any kind of board or reasonable contact. So I just said, who runs this place? So I will be happy to do that.
And Julie, when you send that, could you CC me, because I'd love to be included in that conversation as well.
I think Jonathan, you inspired me there as well. There is another 311 topic that has come up a few times, and I don't know the best next step on it, but a lot of right-of-way violations get reported with no violation found, and you know, I've dug in and the department says they are indeed a violation. So I know that that's not technology services. But Nick, I don't know if there's someone on the, internal right-of-way side that I can talk to. I understand if we've got resourcing issues. I just want us to give the actual answer for why we're not taking next steps on 311 reports, because, there are clear violations in these cases. And when I'm digging in deeper, the department confirms that. So I just want to make sure we're giving honest information to our residents as well.
Yeah, I'm trying to think how between TS and our folks. Let me think on that. I can,
okay.
Yeah, iron it out.
Cool. All right. Other items for the action list? Nick, needs you have for your department that you need from the board?
If you guys could do a quick Zoom instruction sheet for me, that would be very helpful. No, other than that, no, I, as always, appreciate the conversation and kind of the engagement we have on these. I know it can be challenging, with these being public meetings, can't always speak as freely, not that I'm keeping a bunch of secrets on there, but certainly appreciate the conversation and the advice we get from you guys.
We did have this Joe, some stuff, a lot of talk about the scooter issue and parking on the sidewalks and all that. And that hasn't lately been an issue, but I don't know if we want to keep that on the back burner or something like that. Is that going to come up again?
It's
really
absolutely an issue, and it's worse with the
Okay.
snow because sometimes they'll leave those stupid bikes right in like the one place where you could get on a bus, the one place that's clear.
Okay, well, maybe that's something we should consider.
All right. I'm putting it on my notes for the action list too. Doesn't sound like one we've closed. All right. Anything
I
else?
just think when it's freezing, there are fewer pedestrians, so there are fewer people complaining about being run over by, because some of the citizen complaints are like people feel like they just get like they're on the sidewalk and they're just like ramming people, and I don't think there are as many people out strolling when it's 12 degrees.
Yeah, no, and I do know that I don't know if Stephen Riho was twisting arms or politely asking, but I am appreciative of the giant no sidewalk riding stickers that have gone on some of them. I know it's not going to be a panacea, but it is a key first step. All right, is there any other action items lists or questions, comments, or feedbacks about action item lists specifically as well at this time? All right, we'll head over into the odds and ends section of our meeting then here. Jonathan, do you want to kick off the Denver Moves Everyone section here?
Yes, certainly. Hey, team. So everyone on the line here, we have had presentations about Denver Moves Everyone before at an earlier phase of the project. It's a multi-phase project of collecting feedback and ultimately looking to inform and design a draft that is now publicly available of Denver Moves Everyone 2050. In other words, a large roadmap for what our major capital projects and connections should look like through 2050. Just wanted to highlight and remind everyone here that this last phase or like latest phase of major community engagement is open right now. And this is very important for not only us to look at closely, to assess closely and comment on closely, but also very important to share with your networks. I know that there are many surveys that come out and it's hard to keep up with all of them sometimes. But when we talk about budgeting and when we talk about future projects that we're allocating money towards, which is a core sort of charter, part of our organizations, our board's core charter is to review and advise on future projects. When we talk about these large budget and capital allocations, this plan, this Denver Moves Everyone 2050, will essentially create a menu of projects for the next 30-ish years in Denver. As we look on our annual budget reviews, there are many factors that are weighted when deciding where the department puts money. But one of the very major components, a huge input to that is it on Denver Moves 2050? Did we say we were going to do it on this roadmap? Now, other prioritization factors do play into it. Which year? When does the funding come? How likely is it that we can actually get outside funding to leverage, et cetera, et cetera? But if a project or a program is not part of this roadmap or does not align with this roadmap, it's going to be hard to make the case that it should be part of an annual budget. So more so than many of the documents that we might review over time or networks might review over time, it's super important that we get into this one. It's super important that your networks and the communities that you represent get into this one, as it will make, frankly, I mean, if our feedback gets in there and our community feedback gets in there and we do shape the plan, it will make the next 30 years of conversations of this board way easier, because we'll be talking about budgets and projects that align with the plan instead of fighting an uphill battle against a plan that we don't see as relevant or appropriate for the metro region. So little pitch reminder that amongst all the things we're reviewing, this one is particularly important. Would highly recommend we all get in there and share it. I see, Alan, you've asked a question in the chat here. How long is the survey open for? I don't actually know the answer to that question. I'm wondering if anyone on the line does. No? All right, action item. I can email that one out. I know it's somewhere. I've seen it, I think. So can email that one out to this group once I figure it out.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it is if the topics in this board are interesting to you, it is a fascinating document that the DOTI staff clearly put a ton of work into. So, you know, echo Jonathan, it's a killer doc and it will guide this department for a really long time. So make sure you take your chance now.
Sorry, I just answered my own question on a Google email search. It looks like maybe February 25th.
Wow, so 11 days. Oh, with that, Jake, I can give a preview of the next month's agenda. Were there, before I do that, any other odds and ends you wanted to cover?
No, and my network seems to start failing. So if I drop, apologies.
No trouble. All right. So this is largely for the benefit of those participants watching or the public perhaps reviewing or recording this later, because I know you all received this via email. But we are still working through drafting some of our March and April agenda. March is relatively solid at this juncture. As you all might recall, Councilwoman Ortega came to present on to us, or not present to us, but discuss in a public comment period some of the work she's doing around train derailments and policy regarding trains and constructions. Those were multi-department reviews of developments near trains. She has been engaging the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure and others in a multi-month study of comparative policy, recommendations of what to do, et cetera, et cetera. And we even invited her to return to us in March for a more replete discussion of the results of that study, to whatever extent they exist, any proposed legislation she has or will have on the table, and do that in conjunction with the department staff. So we'll have that. As previously mentioned, we will also have a more complete update on the sidewalks ordinance review group, 307 review group, and their timelines and plans, changes they might be considering. An I-25 and Broadway update following Nick's discussion a little bit earlier. And with whatever time remains, we will have a discussion, a more substantive update, as Earl previewed, on the budget process, and particularly how and where and when we should be involved in it, what we can know, when we can know it, and how we can best deliver and organize our feedback. So relatively packed March agenda there. Looking forward to April. Budget. Like we can already get the preview that that's going to be a very big month for the budget and budget review and our timelines. So lacking specifics here, but that'll be a big one. And we are working through other potential topics for that time. We'll likely receive other inputs from the department as they come, and inputs from us as we develop them in the next month or so.
Cool. Thank you, Jonathan. If there's no other questions or comments, I guess I can give you 1 minute back for Valentine's Day.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good month. Bye.
Happy Valentine's Day.